Hey guys, welcome to the Life's Worth Living podcast. I'm your host, John Gossett, and we're back for another week. We want to give a shout out to GTM Builders, the sponsor of this podcast. If you're thinking about building a new home, check out GTM Builders. Visit their website, gtmbuilders.com, or visit one of their 4 model homes in the Tooele Valley. Tonight's episode is brought to you by A. Warner Homes Real Estate. Interest rates are super low, so if you're thinking about buying or selling, reach out to A. Warner Homes Real Estate. Give them a call at 801-867-5078. So, you're back for another week. We sucked you in one more time, so I want to thank all of you for coming back and being interested in the things that we're bringing to you and the guests that we are bringing tonight. I am super, super stoked to have Paul and Susie Augenstein, some friends of mine from Salt Lake City, coming all the way out to Tooele to hang out with me and talk about the LGBTQ population, our friends in that group. And so if we back this up a few years, I don't know how many years ago it was, so the way that we got to be introduced and meet was I tiled your backsplash in your kitchen.
You did. And
I called my nephew and I said, dude, I just tiled your neighbor's house. And he goes, well, what house was it? And I told him, and he goes, yeah, that's my bishop. And he says, oh, they're awesome people. And so for those of you that watched the episode with Mike Pearson, that's my nephew and
our neighbor,
your neighbor. And so anyhow, it's just kind of funny how small of a world it is. And then as I've been kind of watching things that we're doing in prevention and seeing the things that you guys have been doing, I thought this will be a really good topic to touch on because, you know, as you know, as you guys are well aware, we're losing our LGBTQ population like 3 to 4 times the rate of the regular population. For transgender, that can be up to 30 times as much. And so this is a population that I'm super concerned with, trying to figure out a way to let them know that they're loved and that they're accepted. And so I thought it'd be really cool to have you guys on tonight and just kind of talk about what you guys are doing. Tell us, so back us up. First off, I've already heard your guys' love story. This Paul said that Susie was all over him in 8th grade.
Oh yeah, that's exactly how it went.
So tell us how you guys met.
It was Mr. Russell's 8th grade choir class.
Yeah.
That's where I first met her.
Yeah. And she knew she was in love the minute she saw you.
She did.
Oh, my word. Not exactly how it went. No, we did meet then, and it was, we've been on a long journey in our lives together, but we met that year. I don't know, we did a few things that year. His mom actually passed away the summer after we met.
Oh, wow.
So he went through that. That was kind of a sudden, shocking thing that happened in his life, and then we just were friends all the way through high school. Paul was the pursuit. He pursued more than me. I was the one that said, let's just be friends most of the time. But, I know it's totally a friend zone.
Numerous times.
But I really thought I still really liked him. But but it's funny because I always tell everyone, like, when he went on his mission and I said, I'm not waiting. And I truly thought that I'd probably just meet someone else because we were friends forever. I mean, Of course, I thought I really liked him. But I tell everyone, it's like the movie While You Were Sleeping. You know, when he was sleeping, she realized she was in love with someone else. And so when he was gone on his mission and I was dating, that's when I realized how much I loved him. Like every single date I went on, I was like, oh, no. You know, I compared and contrast. So it was really good for me.
So in your yearbook, you found something, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're really good.
Listen.
You got, after we were married.
Stalkers watching you.
Yeah. I opened up the yearbook about a year into our marriage, and there was a page and it says, I'm going to marry you, just you wait. And it was in his handwriting, and he saw it. And I don't even know if you remembered, but you wrote it.
I absolutely wrote it.
Thank goodness I didn't see it.
Man of his word.
Yes.
I'm telling you, it's an odd thing. And I know it, it's for me anyway, it's just unique in the fact that, man, when I met her, it was like I instantly knew she was the yin to my yang.
Yeah.
And where I had a ton of deficiencies, she would make up for it. I just knew it right off the bat. It was the strangest thing at such a young age, but and here we are 29 years later of marriage.
Right.
And
honestly,
Congrats.
I think our friendship, having that long of a friendship, has honestly been the best thing ever for us, because we're definitely not perfect, and we had some really difficult years around year 10. We almost didn't make it. Our marriage almost didn't make it, and I always attribute the fact that our friendship, the days you couldn't say you loved each other, you could still say you liked each other. And that's what got us through some really difficult times that we both had. So I always tell my kids that. I'm like, oh my gosh, be friends.
Yeah.
You need to have everything else, but be friends.
Yeah. Well, hey, you made it to year 10. I made it to year 1, and my wife was thinking, I'm out. I don't know.
No. I think everyone
get those thoughts every once in a while.
And she's still putting up with me 26 years later. So
it gets better though. I always tell people, I'm like, if you think you're in love, you're in a first level kind of love, but you got to journey through life. And when you get to that, I'm so glad that we said, let's keep trying, because when you get to that second level of love, it's just so much better. It's the person you want to grow old with. I mean, there's so many things that are just so much better, but you have to push through.
And it changes. It's a lot different than that
change.
day one love.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you guys live in Riverton. And so kind of back everybody up and tell them what kind of drew you to this space, this being an ally space.
Well, it started for me. It was, it's been so much longer now. I used to say 6 years, 8 years. Maybe it's been even more, maybe between 8 and 10 years ago. I just had a feeling one day, and it just entered my head. Like, I wonder what it would feel like to be a parent of a LGBT child. There was no other reason. I didn't feel like there was a reason for that thought to come in, but I started to just research it a little bit. And I found a family that lived in Logan that their last child of maybe like 8 kids was gay. And I was just reading about their experiences, which then made me look up more experiences. And I honestly don't know, other than I just was curious at the beginning. I remember saying things like, what would we do if we had a gay child? How would you feel? Or, I'd pose those questions. But it didn't enter my mind that I might have thought one of my kids would be gay. That just didn't come until about 8 to 12 months after that beginning thought. Then I was like, oh, no kidding. I'm going to have one of my kids is gay. So then I started to kind of ask my kids questions like, if you have a friend that's gay, would they be nervous to tell their parents? I tried to preface it that way. Then I'd ask them, and it was kind of funny because none of my children are gay. They have a little joke about it now, because they always tell me that for Christmas one of them will come out, And I always tell them, I love you no matter how you're sent to me. I said, I just want to know that I just would hope that people would have a home that they could come home to, that they would be loved and accepted. So anyway, so that was year 1. Year 2 was just another preparation year. Our son was on a visa wait for a mission in California for Brazil. He was really struggling, wanted to come home. And he decided to give it about 6 more months. But we didn't know that. We were in Seattle and we were at a soccer tournament. And so he was going to leave for Brazil on a Thursday. But it was so touch and go with where he was at that we were kind of ready either way, whether he was going to be coming home or going. So I left my phone, and I knew that day he was supposed to be flying out, but I was going to answer it no matter what, because I knew he'd call us from the airport. And so I got a number, thought it was him, and it ended up being the flight attendant who was on his flight. And she just told me how wonderful it was for her to see my son, and just wanted to call and tell me that, which was really huge to me because I was really worried about him. And so I started to cry and said that you just don't know what that means to me, that you would just call me out of the blue. And she says, oh, my mom tells me all the time to call, to look for missionaries and reach out to them. And anyways, I started to cry, which made her start to cry. And then she tells me that she's gay. And she says, and I told your son that I was gay too. And he just looked at me and shook my hand and said, we love you, sister. Thank you for helping us. And then we just oddly became friends. She was like my next step. I didn't understand why God had placed her until we started talking and getting to know each other. And I started getting to know her mom. She had a girlfriend in Colorado. She married her. And then I hadn't even met her, and about 4 months later moved back to Utah and called me and said, we're having a baby shower tomorrow. Do you want to come? So I got my daughter and we went over there, and we walked in, and it's just this beautiful big Mormon family that was celebrating their daughter, celebrating her wife. There was some church music in the background. It felt so surreal to me to be like, what space am I walking into? Like, this is really weird at first, but it was beautiful. And so it was kind of like I had levels, almost like I had been placed to have these steps to go. And then I got to see this thing. And then we just became really good friends. And then Encircle House opened, and I told him, I said, there's this place, and I think we should all go and train and volunteer. And so we started to do that. Now, at that point, Paul was a bishop at the time. I said to him, I'm like, I'm going to go train for this. And I'm a super unconventional bishop's wife. Like, I told him from the beginning when they called him, I'm like, this is what you're going to get. So, I'm not going to pretend to be anything but what I am. And so I just said, we're going to go do this, and we're going to explore this a little bit more because I think it's really important. And I started hearing about the suicide rates and everything like that. And anyways, so we're working down there. And before we went down to train, I kind of knew that one of my young women, when I was in Young Women's at the time, one of the younger ones, I had a feeling that she was gay. And I approached her mom, and I said, do you think your daughter's gay? I just said it, and she's like, I don't know. I said, well, we're going to go train. And she said, can I come with you? And her daughter did end up coming out, and her mom had a beautiful experience. So all these little steps that kind of led into it. You can take over at this point, but we were down there, and it was November, and all of a sudden President Ballard was speaking at BYU, and he gave that address that talked about listening to our LGBT brothers and sisters, seeking to understand them, walking in their shoes a little bit. And we kind of were like, that's kind of a green light in a little bit, that we can maybe talk about this a little bit more in a church setting. I talked about it everywhere else, but we decided to talk about it in a church setting. And do you want to go on with this explanation?
And I hear you pulled off something pretty amazing. So
it was.
We didn't plan it. It was so easy. It didn't feel like it, but it was amazing.
But it was by far one of the greatest, most spiritual meetings I've ever been part of, ever. And it just went off without a hitch. It was beautiful. And that was November, at the time that President Ballard, or Elder Ballard, had spoken, asking us to learn more, understand our LGBTQ brothers and sisters more. Thought, okay, I took it to the stake president, thought, hey, why don't we do this on a stake level? What would you think about? I'll go ahead and coordinate it, but we'll put it together and have a little fireside. He said, well, let me think about it for a minute. Came back to me a week later and said, I don't know if we need to do it on the stake level, but if you want to do it on your ward level, you have my blessing. It's like, okay, I'll take it. So, and that was, early December. We planned it for late January and made a few phone calls.
That's it. Just the people that we had met.
Yeah, a few phone calls. That was it. Everyone was on board. And then come late January, I had sent out an email to the ward asking them to read these certain scriptures in preparation for the upcoming meeting on Sunday. We had our sacrament meeting, and then I dismissed everybody to go into the cultural hall where we were going to have our 2 hours. So at the time we were doing the 3-hour blocks. We took the next 2 hours, and we had our little fireside, I guess, for lack of a better term. But there must have been...
Well, before that, we had a party at our house, a big swim party for the Encircle House. Uh-huh. And there were a few people we were joking with because we like to play Settlers of Catan. And so we had about 8 people come over on a Sunday night to play that game with us that were from the LGBTQ community. And that, which is so funny because that group grew from 10 to 450 that are in that Facebook group that we do. And we have another one that we do a Sunday service class with them, or a class. And we just had said to them, as we had been meeting each month to play games, I had said, hey, I know a lot of you guys don't attend church. And I said, but if you're thinking about ever wanting to be in a meeting that feels safe, this is the meeting. And we just put it out there like that.
Yeah.
140 people showed up. That's how this
we had to your house.
To the church.
To the church.
To the church of the LGBT community.
In that cultural hall, we must have had 300 people in that room.
It was
packed.
Standing room only.
Yeah.
All across the back, across the curtain dividers.
It was exactly what you would have wanted to see.
Yeah.
It was every color, some purple hair, different skin colors, different. I mean, you looked out and it was just this array of beauty.
The diversity was absolutely heavenly.
And they were
beautiful.
So happy to feel like they could be there.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
And I got up first and I simply told, the people that were there that this was not going to be a Q&A. We're not having it's not going to be a doctrinal dissertation. We're not going to go over and have, a scriptural back and forth about the community or what it stands for, what the church's stance is on it. I said, all I want you guys to do for the next 2 hours is sit back and listen and feel. That's it. And then I proceeded to have 6 individuals, no, there were more than that, but 6 different couples, different segments, speak to their experience. And we had experiences from a gay married couple to a couple who'd lost their son by suicide. We had
people still in the church,
out a professor at BYU, out of the church. I mean, we had the whole gambit covered. Yeah. And for that 2 hours, it was just, you could hear a pin drop. It was so reverent. And we have an older population in our ward, the majority. So they were on the front rows right there, just, So, and the real climactic point of that meeting is when I stood up at the end and I started to recite the scripture from the Savior about who is my neighbor. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I said, for all the people in this congregation who are with us today who feel comfortable
from the LGBTQ
community, who have affiliation with it, please stand.
And it was like, shroom, this
it was
thunderous light.
I mean, I don't know how many people stood up. It must have been half to 3/4 of the room. And then I finished the scripture with, behold, this is your brother and your sister, right? And it was really just bringing it home about love. Love is the ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve. And whatever station we are, wherever we're at, whatever life we're living, we can always love somebody.
Yeah.
And I think through that love, we can save lives, spiritually and temporally.
Oh, 100%.
100%. And so that was kind of our springboard into everything else. It just kind of took off.
So in the weeks that followed, what were the comments you were getting from people within the ward?
Within the ward.
They were amazing. Like they after that meeting was over, because I was having everyone over at my house for dinner. I said, anyone that comes here, come and have dinner. We had like 100 and something people over, and they were the older people. It was like a receiving line. They just went through all the speakers and just cried with them. And they weren't easy stories to hear. No, some of them were really, really difficult. Because Morgan and her mom spoke, and she told the beauty.
She was the flight attendant.
Gotcha.
And Morgan almost lost her life. They found her, too, when she got to her rock bottom. And she almost lost her life. And she talked about what happened with her family and the love. But our other ones, another lesbian couple that were married, the exact opposite story. Their mom made it really, it was
tragic.
And she just begged everyone, we still want to be loved by you guys. We still want to feel like we're a part of something, even if it's not everything you think we should be. We're still here, kind of like we exist. And so it was.
But the responses, they weren't just, localized to our ward. We had emails.
My phone
come in from all over the world.
All over the world.
Australia, England,
every
Mexico,
country. People just heard about it, and it just
all over the
went
United
crazy.
States. It was insane.
It was funny because even the very next day, Steve Young called Paul. And he said, I'm like to Paul, I'm like, oh, you're supposed to call back Steve Young. And they were talking, and he said, how did you do this? And Paul said, do what? And he's like, you do it all the time. You do firesides, because his wife's, she has a gay brother. And he says, yeah, we do firesides, but not in a meeting at church. And we're like, I don't know how it happened, but it happened, and it was all fine. And it was like heaven rested on it, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like you outlined anything that was something that isn't something we should embrace anyway. So
it just was, we're presenting something that's we've all in the past been uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
And when people don't like to be uncomfortable. It's way easier to be status quo. I represent to a lot of people uncomfortable because I'm in a space where I know where I need to be, and I'm okay that my presence makes people uncomfortable right now because I had to be uncomfortable. I had to think about things that were hard to think about.
But it's kind of when you stretch that you grow too. I mean,
no question.
And
100%.
So, did you have any kickback from wanting to make this happen?
No, not to make it
not to make it happen.
Everybody was behind it.
Oh yeah, we had members of the stake presidency there with us in the meeting.
Oh yeah,
it was great.
He introduced the whole meeting, the member of the stake presidency, and he was great. I mean,
there was no pushback getting up to it.
A little bit after.
The responses that came in were, 99 to 1.
Yeah.
If that. I mean, they were just, I got 1 or 2 comments. I got an anonymous letter from somebody who wrote me. But that was it. Unsigned.
He didn't even address that because he's like, if someone's going to write, he was like this, I'll address anyone that wants to talk to me, but if you don't sign your name.
Come on, we'll have a conversation.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah.
But no, that was it.
It was weird. I collected everything too, and just like in a great big file, I just printed off all of these messages that were coming, because what it did is, all of a sudden I'd have parents say, "My daughter was in uni last week. I didn't know where to go." What it did is it was like opening Pandora's box of like, wait a minute, I'm not alone, because that's what everyone thinks, and in a church where family is so fundamental, and people have their children that are coming out to them and they don't know where they fit in anymore. It's a very, very lonely place.
Challenging.
And you find that within that group, as well as people that are thinking of ending their lives. I mean, 100%. It's almost like this, where you withdraw and you isolate. And man, when you're isolated and you have so much of this other stuff in the background.
Right. That was the biggest part. So our friends, George and Allison Doyson, they were the ones that spoke about their son, and Stockton lost his life to suicide 4 years ago. And we met them about a year after, and I just kind of quizzed her. I just said, tell me what his experience was. And so she started telling me, and we had talked about this before the podcast a little, and she said, when he came out, of course, it's an adjustment for everything to wrap your mind around. What are we going to do? Our kid just told us that they're gay. And, they were amazing. They got him in affirmation and all these different organizations that could help him. But ultimately, what Stockton didn't have was community. And she told me that. She said, we lost our community in our ward and in his school and in our neighborhood. And all of a sudden, these layers started coming. And I remember after her telling me that, thinking, not on my watch. When you are empowered with information, you have to do something with it after, or why did you get it in the first place? Mm-hmm. And that's when these game nights started coming up. And so we started doing the game nights. They started doing something called Dine and Dash. So almost every Sunday, between a group of us allies, we provided an activity for these kids that felt othered. I have a board on my wall that some of them gave me for pictures, and it has over 200 kids on it now. And I could name every one of them. Every one of them. And almost their stories. And they're all from our background. A few from other religions, but because it's mostly an LDS place, most of them are LDS. And they're beautiful.
They're beautiful kids. We hear many, many stories, and they run the entire gambit.
And they're the blood of your knuckles, blood of your knees on my mission. If I go on a mission, God's going to fix me.
Yeah, I'm going to come home straight.
And they're the best. There are some of the best leaders. They're the APs of the mission, because they are working so hard, because they are saying to God, I know you can help me. And so we created this space for them to come, which just ended up growing, because when one would hear about it, another would say, can I enter this space? And then another parent would be like, wait, there's a place my kid can go and feel like he has community and maybe not want to take their lives, So it opened up that. And then about 2 years ago, was it 2 years? Has it been for Sunday school? Or, well, we call it Love and Lift. It's our, and it's a class. We finally were like, you know what? Obviously, some of these kids don't feel like they can be at church.
Yeah.
It's too hard for them, and they get to make the decisions for their life. And in my opinion, I think all should be welcome. Mm-hmm. I don't care if someone's married to the same sex or not. Churches should be for all of us to be there together, to unify and uplift each other. But of course, they don't all feel that they belong. And so we just thought, you know what? They want to be a part of something because they're so used to it. They're so used to the kind of community that the LDS Church offers. And so we just started a Sunday school class, And our concept was it needed to be on the elements or the characteristics of Christ in any way you want to present it, which some is Brene Brown and some is, a podcast that they heard that was awesome. And we have over, I think now, almost 45 to 50 teachers, and they're begging to teach. And it's beautiful. Beautiful lessons. Like you leave feeling so good. And they're raw. Sometimes they just talk about the hardest things, but at the end, they always leave them feeling uplifted. And so I just said, we're creating a space that's not fully there yet for them, but we're sure as heck not going to lose them. We're going to provide it somehow.
Well, to your point, John, you said that earlier, if not me, who?
Yeah.
Right. If not us, who?
Well, and I think as you were saying that, the thought that came to my mind is, how many times do we hear missionaries come back from South and Central America? And they're the ones that I always hear say kind of a similar thing. They'll say, churches are like hospitals. They're there to fix people. They're there to heal people. And I think here in Utah, where we're the majority and there's so much of it, I think many times we forget that it's okay to not be perfect.
Right.
It's okay to say, you know what, I got some baggage and I got some stuff I got to work on. And I think if we got rid of that perfectionism in our minds that everybody's got to be, it's not about just making sure that you're there, your kids are dressed and behaving right, just own it.
Yeah. We do, because we truly are supposed to be our basic thing is to mourn with those that mourn. And you can't mourn with someone if you don't really try to hear their story, And I think that's hard for some to just hear their story.
That's interesting. I've never had that happen before.
It's always a first. But yeah, I mean, it's so what had happened when that meeting was over with, I kind of thought, you know what? Things can always die down. It was a really beautifully edifying meeting, but then we started a page called Let's Love Better, and it was just one, and there had been some other things out by Mama Dragons and stuff like that, but it was just a place for someone to tell their story, and for an LGBT person. And so they started to tell their stories, and that was another thing that really got people, because when you hear someone's story and you know what they've done to get to that point in their life, then you start to be able to kind of walk in their shoes more. And so it just kind of blossomed from that point. For me, I've felt very divinely led to be in this space, and in fact, I even attribute it to the very about first 4 lines of my patriarchal blessing to be in it, because it was very much, not to what my knowledge for years and years and years, talked about some of the things that I would need to do in this earth and some of the people that I would need to find. And when I started finding them, I understood my blessing. Like it was just like hair on your neck, behind your neck, standing up, like knowing when one of them was Richard Osler.
Yeah.
When I knew right away that he was one, because it was referring to the great ones. When you find the great ones, and you'll know what your mission is. And, in your young mind, you think, what is the great ones? You think, is it a prophet? Is it this or that? But I realized the great ones are all of us, and we're kind of designed to do certain things. And so I found that these what I call the great ones have popped up everywhere. And all of a sudden I just hear from them, and they're in Texas, and they're in Wisconsin, and they're all these places where all of a sudden someone else is saying the same thing. Like, I'm calling you because I felt guided to be in this space. What do I do with this space? And I said, well, we're all figuring it out together. I go, but I bet you we were on a committee in heaven. I said, I bet you we were up there talking about this stuff, and and now we're trying to fulfill something that we're supposed to accomplish.
But we all come here to earth with different gifts and different. And I think there is things that we're supposed to do. I mean, had somebody told me 10 years ago that I was going to devote so much of my time to suicide prevention, I'd laughed at them and said, whatever, you know, I'm too fun. That's not a fun thing. And
and especially when for you and us, it wasn't something that hit us immediately directly in our families.
Exactly.
But maybe that's also why. Because to me, what an ally really means is that you become comfortable in a space that you're unfamiliar with. And you look at it like, I'm just so privileged to be in the space of allyship. Like, it's so incredibly easy for me to love these people. And I told you before, I have Black children, and the country's climate right now has been really difficult for me having Black children. Yeah. And all of a sudden I realized this is what it feels like for these parents that have gay children, that place of like, oh my gosh, I'd do anything for my child, and I hope the world will be nice to them.
Yeah. And so the date that we're recording this, it's not going to come out today, but today is the 19th anniversary of September 11th. And I did a post this morning just thinking, every September 11th, your mind goes back to exactly where you were when it happened. And for some reason today, I was thinking, isn't it interesting? 19 years ago, it took a terrorist attack for this country to come together. Mm-hmm. That there was no bickering, there was no fighting, there was nothing. Everybody was unified. We loved each other. We wanted, and I think, isn't that sad that it's only been 19 years? Yeah. And yet, look where we're at today. And it's so divisive. And there's so much going on. The Black Lives Matter. You look at the LGBT community. I mean, it's amazing, and everything could be cured with love.
Absolutely.
Yep. There's
acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. It truly is a remedy for everything, but it's just unfortunate.
It really is.
With the circumstances that we're in, it just seems to be so much more divisive and so much more painful and just hurtful. And, I guess as I look at what we're trying to do, and also what you're doing, John, in our spaces that we're in, is truly, if you can make a difference to the one, right? It's the starfish story. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes you feel like, are we making a difference? I mean, there's so much pain out there. How can I possibly make a dent in that? But truly, as you've experienced and as we have too, when you find and get that one, it makes all the difference in the world.
It does.
Absolutely does. And so we do it for the one.
And I think we forget our jobs at times. It's really easy to take God's job. And He's the only one that can do that job. Like, used to when I was in Young Women, I'm like, you got to understand that our Heavenly Father, the reason He gets that job and we don't get it is because we stink at it. Yeah. He's benevolent, loving, kind. He knows our life from beginning to end in the sense that He knows who we are. And I said, that's what makes Him so good. He wants His children to succeed, all of us. He's not out to set a path of where we can't succeed. So He's a great judge, and He's going to make it fair, and we're all going to get back. But we take that job upon ourselves, and it moves into the space of those first two commandments, which are to love our heavenly parents and to love our neighbor. That would be really simple if we only focused on that. Yeah. If we moved everything else to the side, what a great way to live,
It is. And I sit back and think, how many times do we judge when it's not our place to judge? And man, I don't want that weight on my shoulders.
No.
I'm totally good sitting back where I'm at and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to love everybody, accept everybody. And, and I've said it before on the podcast, one of the most beautiful things is diversity.
Yep.
No,
if we were all accountants or we were all attorneys,
Yep.
I love that everybody brings something different to the table. And that I haven't met somebody that I haven't thought, wow, they're incredible at this, or they're good at this, and they could be things I totally suck at. But, but I love the fact that everybody's got a gift, mm-hmm. and you're never going to find out what those gifts are if you don't build relationships with people. Right. And really, that's what this life's about: it's building relationships, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's really like all the chapters. It's like what Richard says: all the chapters have not been written yet. We have up to so many chapters in this book of life. And the beauty of our faith is that we get to continue to have revelation and additional light and understanding. And I pray for that all the time. I pray for my leaders to continually to dig deep like the rest of us are and search for that further light and knowledge, because we have the most amazing families out there that are suffering, that I call them the worker bees. You have these parents, these, that have served in every kind of calling. Their whole lives have given everything to the church. And then sometimes they feel othered. Well, not sometimes, a lot of times. They all of a sudden are having this child they love that has just come out. And we as members don't know what to do with them. So we kind of just, all right, why don't you just stand over there where, we don't quite know what to say and do with you. Well, you know what you can say is you can say, how are you? I would love to sit with you and listen to your story. I wonder what that must feel like. Can you explain to me how that feels? There's so many questions you can ask someone and have them be able to trust you, and you don't have to have it all figured out,
Well, I think that's one of the things, you talk about bearing other people's burdens. You have to be able to do that to understand what Christ went through. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta walk in those shoes. You gotta understand. And I think that's a difference between sympathy and empathy is you get it. You understand.
And our LGBTQ kids have walked with Christ. Mm-hmm. They know his atonement more than any I've ever seen. Like they said, they have bloodied their knees. And like I told you before today, it's the best kept secret. I almost think, do I dare do a podcast again where I tell how awesome these people are? Because they're going to steal my friends. They are amazing. Their families, their kids. It's our world now. It's all of our friends. And I feel like I'm in heaven already. And so if this is what heaven feels like, I'm excited for it. But people don't enter this space. And so they're never going to know how amazing it is. And maybe, I always tell the parents this too, because you see parents just crack wide open. They learn to love at a level, like what we learned as well, that you never ever thought that you would be at. And maybe that's part of God's plan. I mean, it's really, really easy to love someone that believes or does things similarly to you. But does that stretch us? Does that make us grow? So maybe God, with all this diversity, he knows how to teach us love if we are willing to break out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
I
love that. So, Paul, what can we do? I mean, what can we do in our communities to better support that group? I mean, what are we missing?
The engagement, right? People need to engage. And to Susie's recent point, if we don't engage, we don't get to know them, we don't grow. But if we would engage with them, if we would sit down and just listen to them, like we did on that Sunday, just listen to their stories. And as you listen, you'll be able to feel. And in that feeling, you're going to have the empathy, you'll have the sympathy. You'll start to generate a real compassion for these individuals. And with that compassion, I think that turns to respect, which in turn comes to love. Understand and then love. And that can make all the difference. And not even within our LGBTQ community, because while that is a significant portion, unfortunately, of suicides, those people who do feel ostracized or in the marginalized,
so many,
or lonely, or haven't heard their story or haven't had their story heard, makes it a really difficult place to be. But I think if people would just listen, if they would have the faith to just sit down and say, tell me your story.
Didn't we learn that there's probably 7 to 8 families minimally in a ward that has an LGBTQ child or someone close? And they think they're the only ones. So they have all these people that could be supportive, but they don't dare say it. So my opinion is if you have the guts, I would say, for, in spaces, is you just, in a Relief Society lesson, in a priesthood lesson, say, I know that there are probably some of you out there that are in a space where you have LGBTQ loved ones in your life. We want you to know that we're here for you and we love you and we hope that you always feel safe and loved here, and we hope your children feel safe and loved here. I mean, it's just, if you open the door, you just open the door and you say it, and they come, huh?
They'll walk through the door.
Yeah. Sure. They're waiting to walk through the door.
But we have to continue to create this network, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we've been trying to do, is just connect people so that they can have their story heard.
So what do you think? to that, do you think the reason why they're not making those connections? What is the reason they're not making those connections? Just out of fear?
Absolutely.
Fear of the unknown?
Fear.
Absolutely.
Fear. Well, number one, you take the culture of our church and you step outside what everyone kind of thinks is the norm, and you run a risk of feeling part of that community. And so, but what people don't realize is when you step outside, there's a whole bunch of people that need a community with you. So it's scary.
Yeah,
it's scary.
Fear paralyzes people. I mean, in all way, in every form, right? Not even just in this space, but careers. Not taking a step, or not making a choice, or taking a step into the dark. Having a bit of faith, or trying something new, which is scary. Right. We just don't do it because we like our comfort zone. But in a lot of places, those who are feeling this marginalization and loneliness they don't go out. They don't feel safe.
Well, think about in our young women's and young men's classes, how many kids are sitting there and might be hearing things that are damaging and hurtful, and sitting there, and we're not acknowledging that they're there. I remember having to talk to like bringing it up to my Laurels when we had one of our young women, and sadly, I didn't do the right thing at the time. I was a Laurels advisor watching this young woman slowly leave us, and instinctually I knew what was going on, but then thought, but she's not in Laurel yet. I mean, how dumb is that? And it took me, once she became that and she was not coming anymore, getting her to trust me and knowing that I really cared about her was much more difficult when we didn't take care of showing her how much we loved her while she was there. And we're now friends, and we message a lot back and forth we have, and it's been a beautiful relationship, really, really good. But I missed the boat in following that personal instinct and revelation to reach out to her when I should have. You don't need to have a calling or a title or anything. You just need to
be interested.
Yeah, be interested and watch for those signs.
Yep, follow that premonition. Follow the instinct and impression you have to engage. We
have to tell each other to be careful what they say. Words hurt. And when we have testimonies or things like that, or where people bring in something that's outdated or just not kind or correct, they hurt. And, people don't want to come back. When they hear things like that, they just don't want to be there.
And that's the problem, because I think you can't control everything that leaves somebody's mouth. But, there was a story I'd heard about a young man that came out that he was gay, and telling his parents, and he had said, but I'd heard my dad for all of these years talk about, I knew what his feelings were. And so I think this is, if nothing else, this is a really good reminder to understand that you might not know that somebody's
right
in that group, and that, like you said, words can be harmful, hurtful.
Well, look at there's many, many mixed orientation marriages.
Yeah.
And so you can have, men or women that are in those that are hearing these things too. And a lot of the LGBT, they'll admit it, they internalize their own homophobia. Mm-hmm. They were so determined that they weren't going to be gay that they were sometimes the hardest on people, because of they just didn't want to have that label. And it's like anything in the church, like shame can be powerful. We do it with subjects like pornography and those kind of things where we should be like, listen, we've got to be there for each other. But instead, sometimes we say things that make the problems worse for someone because they don't want the shame that's attached to it. So rather than getting help, we shame them.
Mm-hmm. Which drives it even deeper.
Drives it deeper. And, we're all going to have hiccups in life. And I don't know. I just think that we need to just create congregations that love. Yeah. We just have to open it up. And I always say, be the hand that comes up in the lesson, that when someone maybe says something that's leading down a direction that's harsh, turn it around. And you don't have to be mean about it. You just have to say, hey, I'm going to present another way to look at this. This is an experience I have. I have a friend who has a gay son, or this is, you know what I mean? And there's ways that you can pull it in and say, I'm just giving another point of view,
What do you think the LGBT community needs the most from us?
They need to feel like they belong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like I said, we are the best. Mormons are the best at community until you slip a layer outside of it. And then you don't feel like you belong. And they need to feel like they belong. It's why they get lonely. It's why they get sad. And it's why they sometimes say, if you guys all keep telling me, this is the general thought for people that think about suicide or have completed it, is you keep saying to me that I'm going to be different in heaven, then why don't I just get there? That's a prevailing thought that goes through their minds. Because you won't let me be who I am, and you keep saying this is who I am, then why am I going to stay here and be so miserable? You know?
Wow.
And so...
And you know what? Everybody is here for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And there's not any mistakes.
Nope.
No, there isn't. We just don't have all the chapters yet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what's the biggest misconception you think that we're dealing with? When it comes to people looking inside that group, what's the biggest misconception?
That they're pedophiles, that they only are interested in sexual relationships, that they are deviant. Those are a lot of things. They're not.
That's exactly right.
They're
Spot
not
on.
that they're choosing something because they want to be deviant. And honestly, what we told someone this one time, and it's really shocked. I mean, it kind of shocks people, but I'll shock them. And I say, listen, back in the 60s and the 70s, when everyone's like, oh my gosh, all of these LGBT, and they're going to San Francisco and they're doing this and this. And I'll say, I wonder why they went there. I said, do you think possibly it's because we kicked them out of our pews? I said, everyone needs community. And I said, and when you're at your deepest and your darkest place, you still want community. And so if we aren't giving it to them, if we're not providing that space,
they will find it.
They'll find it. And the only space that was available for them was that, because our churches said no. And instead they could have grown up with our same code and our same standards and our same whatever. But we said no, even just saying you were back then, you were there. So when they do that, I want to say, but you got to look deeper, because we're part of that problem.
Yeah. And that's really hurtful, I think, when you have mom and a dad that are deep in their faith and then get word that, you know, maybe one of their children is part of this group. And I think they feel that tug of war between,
yes,
you love your kids unconditionally, right? I mean, that's what we do as parents. And then you feel like if you take a step that direction, you're taking a step away from.
Right.
So how do we best handle that?
Gosh, we have so many people that have traveled that.
We do. On both ends of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Those who, have come out to their parents and either been kicked out of their house for their being gay, or completely transforming that household into a beautiful place of acceptance and love. It runs the entire gambit. But
yeah, the personal revelation that we've heard from parents is beautiful. Mm-hmm. And the ones that go to that place where they know, God has basically told them. I have a beautiful story that actually what Deb was talking to us about, but where her parents finally, and this is years and years ago, when it wasn't very accepted at all, and we're in the celestial room, and finally just said, you get home and get your daughter here and get her partner here, and you love them. And I think that what we have to do, what most people learn, is that there's certainty. We all think everything's so certain, and then you enter the space where you're like, wait a minute. There's uncertainty, which steps you into faith. And I think they just step into that faithful path of uncertainty and say, I'm going to love my child. And it's not going to matter,
Totally. What I think is, as we were talking about this, a few weeks back, I had Todd Sylvester, who works at Wasatch Recovery. And in recovery, they talk about the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Right.
So the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's what those people are craving. People that are struggling with an addiction, they're craving connection.
Right.
And it's funny how all of these different things, suicide prevention, different communities that are in need. We're all craving community.
Right.
And we need that. The opposite of that is when you isolate and you withdraw from because you don't feel accepted. And when you're all alone, I described it to somebody once that, have you ever had a toothache? And you have a toothache and you can be at work and you've got a toothache and it's kind of like this nagging toothache. You know it's there, but you're focused on other things. There's nothing worse than a toothache when you're laying in bed all by yourself. And I think that's really,
it's pronounced,
very similar to this. When you isolate and you've got all that alone time, things can go south really quick.
That's the other
it amplifies the pain.
It does.
And the other big misconception right there is that very thing is people will say, oh, we knew it. We knew when they said they were gay, and look, now they're on drugs, and now they're doing this, and now they're doing that. That isn't a product of saying that you're gay. That's a product of feeling isolated.
Totally.
And so a lack of community.
Connection.
They don't know what to do. And I'll tell people, they'll say, oh, my son or whoever, he's depressed and he's an alcoholic. And I often say, then I'll give you the first step to that. The first step is you love your son and you love whoever he chooses to love. You bring him into your home and you love them. And I promise you the depression and the alcoholism will subside. And I've even had someone in the past say, oh, no, I can't do that. We can help them with that, but we can't be okay with them being gay. And I'm like, they're interconnected. What they're doing right now is because you're not connecting with them. And so that's another really big misconception. During COVID, I mean, we were so worried because we had been doing Sunday schools every single week, game nights, sometimes 70, 80 people, all of these things. And then boom.
All of a sudden the connectivity
done.
dissipates.
It's off. We went out, and between me and two other friends that we do, we have them at our homes, and we bought treats. So we bought a bunch of gummy bears, and we went on treks every week for 2 months and hit 150 kids. Just went to their homes, stood out by them, put it up on their door, went out to our car, waved, told them we love them.
Just to maintain the
Just to maintain a connection. Yeah.
So
just because we knew how isolated they already felt, besides having COVID come in and take away what we tried to build for them.
It's incredible what this COVID's really done. And we're looking at the death tolls, and I think really we have no idea what it's really, take that death toll out of it, and it has, they've seen suicide attempts skyrocket.
Yeah, that's true.
So in turn, you're going to have suicides that skyrocket, addictions up, everything, domestic violence. I mean, it's crazy when you think what something like that can. Yeah.
And it's a lack of worldwide community. So when we feel it, like in your darkest moment during COVID with all of us, or everyone lost something. And I always say, don't think that your loss is any different than someone else's. It's still your loss. My loss was that I have kids that live in Europe, and we were supposed to meet them up 3 different times. And we didn't get to see him for that whole 6 months. That was a loss to me. Now, to someone else, they might be like, oh, cry me a river. Sorry you didn't get to go on vacation. But it was a loss to me to not see my kids. Yeah. And so loss is loss. So when you feel that loss, but before your life was actually pretty good and connected, now imagine what someone that's LGBT that didn't have that even before COVID. Yeah. That's where I think you can create empathy. Like, all of a sudden, we are all one human family that's feeling some sort of loss.
That's the phone.
That's yours.
That's probably
It's our. You should go turn it off.
It's okay.
This was big.
Yeah, we're popular. What can we say?
I turned mine on silent, but yeah, I wish there was an easier answer, but I think we're getting there. I think there's so many beautiful things that are coming because we've allowed ourselves to be in these spaces that were uncomfortable. Yeah.
So what's the best way for different, and it doesn't even have to be LDS. What would you recommend? Because you kind of were the pioneer in this. How can we get these messages out to our congregations, LDS, any other faith? How do we get it to them and say, this is a topic that can't be the elephant in the room anymore. We need to just face it head on and let's discuss it.
It's probably like what George is doing, which it'd be great for you to be able to talk to him So George and Allison have created a group called Peculiar. Mm-hmm. They did it after their son who passed away, and it is to create allyship in the faith communities, and they call it the Unconditional Family Project. And so like we had a meeting last night where we had someone speak that was from the community, and then our theme was empowerment, and it's meant to show families, kind of like the Encircle model. You don't have to give up your faith to love your child. No. And it's meant for all faith communities. So that's starting. What do you think you do on a local level? I mean, theirs is amazing.
There is, as they try and do it on a more broader scope. But again, I think it really comes down to the one. And every time you have an engagement, every time you have a conversation, or whenever you're in a situation with family, friends, neighbors, whatever the case may be, and this topic comes up, it's being unapologetic and courageous in sharing stories and engaging in that dialogue, taking people from their comfort zone into a bit of discomfort to have them ask questions. I mean, we need to inquire. We need to be really, I think that inquiry is the key to growth. Yeah. It really is. But a lot of times I think so many people are afraid of what they might find out, or what that might do to their opinions, or how that might shape them in a different way. And it's fear. We already talked about that. And so I think it needs to be in every situation that we've got, just to have that conversation, to be courageous enough to engage in that.
And ask them dialogue. To be like, for us, I think it's fun and I love it. Whenever I know we're going to have a meeting that will be pretty safe. Like one time when I spoke, I just put a thing out and I said, hey, I'm speaking in church if anyone wants to come. And I get the whole thing fills up in the back, and even some couples come. And when my son came home from his mission and he gave his thing, I said, it's going to be a talk you'll be okay with. and that has made the members of our ward, yep. They go out and they reach out to them. I love it, because all of a sudden they see them like, I've seen you here before, and we're so glad you're back. And
again, it's taken them from that area of comfort, mm-hmm. normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill Sunday, to, oh, this is different. Why is it different?
Oh,
Who
wait.
are they? What's their
They're
story?
Normal, just like
Why
us.
Are they here? So the inquiry starts that ball rolling, and that's where growth comes. So it's just one at a time.
Right. I've seen people change. I've seen the parents that I didn't know if I struggled with, that were just as strict and black and white and everything, and I just thought their kids are never going to survive. I have seen things, their hearts just break open and just change. It shows me that anybody can change.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
You never know what you're missing until you give it a chance, and realize that, I think maybe one of the misconceptions that I see is people are scared to make that connection, because they think that for some reason it's going to be a push of that on you.
Well, they think everything's an agenda.
And it's not. It's, these people just want to be loved, mm-hmm. accepted.
What did we see this week? Did you see that little meme that said, it says, this is the agenda of an LGBTQ person. Walk my dog, go to work, go to the gym. That's our agenda.
Yeah.
It's the same as everyone else.
That's all there is to it, yeah. So if you were to give advice to somebody that has maybe made a connection with somebody within that community, what advice would you give them as far as how to build that relationship?
I would say to dive into something that feels uncomfortable. Like the first thing when Paul was even bishop, a couple came in, and at the end I said, let's go on a double date. And they literally about dropped to the floor. They're like, you did not just ask us that. And I'm like, I did. But your husband's the bishop. Yeah, he's the bishop. And we would love to go on a double date with you and get to know you guys. Just, you step into their space. Mm-hmm. And
what does that hurt?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
but on the other end of that, I mean, that's amazing.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Minister to them.
It's like that old saying, to the world, you may just be one person.
Yeah.
But to that one person, you might just be the world.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I mean, we had some of our best friends, Kent and Cole, and they're dating, and they came out. We did a destination wedding for my son. They came out to San Diego and did it all for us. They did the food, they had the band, the music, and they did everything. And what was so beautiful is that my son gets sealed in the temple, and they came and they had snack bags that they delivered because they said, you guys are going to be so tired and so hungry that we wanted to make sure that you were fed. And I thought to myself, it just made me cry because I'm like, this is a space that they can't be in the temple. They can't go there anymore. But they came outside the temple and brought us snack bags. And then I thought to myself, and yet some people aren't willing to make a wedding cake.
Yeah.
And I just think, we got to dig deeper. They were beautiful human beings that were making our day the very best they could. They cried with us. It was.
Yeah.
So how has becoming an ally changed your guys' life?
It's flipped it upside down.
Yeah, for the best.
For the better.
Our children
by far
have evolved to places that are incredible. They're all little social warriors in different respects.
Well, it's caused them to ask and inquire and ask not only about the space, but
a few of them were homophobic. A few of my kids were kind of like, "What are you doing, Mom?"
Yeah.
And they have transformed.
They were a little slower on the uptake, but once they got there, it's just wide open. Sky's the limit, and it's so fun to see their growth blossom the way it has.
When they come back from college, or the ones that live in England, they just the first thing they want to do is, when are we going to have a night that this person comes over?
They want to connect immediately,
and they want it back. Yeah.
And they plan some of the best parties.
Oh yes, they do.
No idea.
Yes, they do.
It's the talent, the compassion, the empathy that they have. A minority group automatically just knows how to have empathy. And they will sit with anyone, and they will put their arms around them, and they'll take the time. They don't have another agenda ever. If someone needs them, they're there.
You mentioned at the get-go about families that struggled when they had a child come out, and they kind of have turned them away because of their sexuality. What have they missed out on?
Oh my gosh. They really have, and they don't even. I think that it's what we said again. It's just so much fear. I don't know if did I mention that little interview I had listened to about God's final interview. I haven't said it right here. I must have told someone earlier today about it again. There's this little snippet, and I keep it on my phone. And he's actually was one of the actors in the Temple movie. He was one of Peter, James, and John. But he runs a camp for, I think, troubled teens or something like that. I replay this to myself, and I give it to people often because it reminds me for my own kids. But in so many words, he said this: I think in God's final interview with you, I don't think he's going to say things like, did all your kids go to church? Did you keep this one off drugs? Did you do this? Did you do that? He says, I just don't think that's going to be the question. He says, I think the question is going to be, did you learn to love that person that I put into your life in a very particular way? Did you learn to love that person like I do? And every time I think about that, and I think about each of my individual kids, I have to back up sometimes when I'm trying to infuse everything on them that I think should be their life, and step back and say, God put them in my life for this reason, and my job is to love them and to give them their wings. And I think the same place, if parents of LGBT kids could step back and say, God placed this child for me. There's something in this for me. There's something I get to learn, and there is a characteristic of deity that I get to develop by having this person in my life.
If people could just let themselves be vulnerable, which we don't, right? We always put on that facade of I'm strong, I'm collected, I'm
checking my boxes,
I'm doing the right stuff. But in that vulnerability of I don't know the answers, or I messed up here, or I don't know which direction to go, and putting that out there, it's amazing what comes back to you. And I'd say the best example we have of that anyway, I think, is Susie, right? In her inquiry and her vulnerability, she puts it out there. And over the past several years in being in this space, it's amazing to me the number of individuals and people who reach out to her almost daily now. I mean, daily. Hey, my son or my daughter's just come out. Or, hey, my son or daughter is thinking about, X or Y or whatever. Can you help me? I need some advice.
Well,
can we go to lunch? I need to talk.
Oddly enough, I think I'm just a connector. That's what you've always said. Like, I don't have the answers. Like,
but she is a connector, and she can find somebody who would have an answer or be the right person to address that issue.
I have so many friends that have walked this journey now that I seem to be a way to funnel people to where they could actually get the right answers. Because I don't, like, someone once called me and said, oh my gosh, I don't know you, but I know that you've done this and this and this, and I know someone that's getting kicked out of their apartment because they're gay. They basically told him that. And I'm thinking,
what do we do?
I have no idea what to do for you. I don't even know why you'd ask me. I mean, I'm not, but right then in my head, I was like, I do know someone. And I funneled him to a lawyer that I knew had someone else to do someone, and we got the thing resolved. And so I think it's opening yourself up to knowing that you can find help for people. I certainly am not an expert on LGBT. I've had to, for years, even apologize. And I'll sit down with the kids and I'll say, listen, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to say things wrong. I'm just learning. So just educate me and let me mess up and forgive me and let me move forward so that I can be in a space that's more supportive for you. Because you don't know. I mean, transgender, for one, that's a space that I was so unfamiliar with, that I had to learn what hurt them or what didn't hurt them. I had to learn to use proper pronouns, those kind of things. And they're so forgiving, if you admit it, if you say, you know what,
the willingness to learn.
I was going to say, I think they recognize when you're trying.
Absolutely.
And so I think maybe that could be part of the reason for that loss of connection is they're afraid to offend.
Right.
People are afraid to offend by entering that space, but
you say you're learning.
But you know what? If they know that you're looking out for their best interest, they're going to let you screw up, and it's going to be okay.
Absolutely.
The people we need is people that we need everyone. But if we can get people that don't have LGBTQ children to understand the importance of connection with that group, that will be miraculous. We don't need to stay. It's like a family reunion when your family gets really, really big, and then you only sit with your brothers and sisters and their cousins, and you don't interact with the rest of the family. Yeah. You're like, why did we even come? Same kind of space. If they can move away from the groups that they're comfortable with and say, I'm going to venture over here to get to know you and then we connect.
And that's the only thing we're going to take with us is those relationships we make here. So, I mean, really, don't miss out.
No.
Yeah. So, what last bit of advice? What do the listeners need to hear?
Go for it.
It's all on you, Paul.
I'm more of a talker.
Don't screw this up.
Yeah, no. I think everything we've said here tonight, really, it would just be, I'd be reiterating what we have said, and that is, have an inquiring mind, be forgiving, listen with compassion, engage in the wrestle, and the discomfort, knowing that in that comes growth. But, there's a lot of that same advice that I would give that we have over the course of the night.
I think also, right now, this isn't you, but tomorrow it could be. Yeah. In a week it could be. In a year it could be. It could be a grandkid. It could be a nephew. Yeah. So be open to learning now so that when, not if, but when, because all of us will enter that space in some form of a connection, so that you are ready to be the person that you would want, that you need to be and that person needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, prepare now.
I think to go along with that, I think we need to be always thinking about what we say so that it's not offensive to a group or an individual, because I think it's something that, the older we get, the more jaded we are, and I think we say things that can be inappropriate, and so we just got to try our best. Nobody's perfect, but try our best to always think about who might be listening, and I think that would be a huge help. Well, you guys, I owe you big time for coming out to Tooele.
Oh, it was a great date night.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
You've never taken her on a date to Tooele?
No.
What? This is a first? 29 years?
Coming back.
I've missed out. I have missed out. When we're done here, we're going to tour the valley.
Well, I've got an idea for you after you leave here. But no, what a blessing you guys have been. And I I just recognized the fact that you were inspired to enter this place. And I know for a fact you've touched thousands of lives. Had you not got out of your comfort zone and actually, I mean, big props to you, because most people would have thought, okay, well, that's a crazy thought, whatever. But you did it. But you did it.
But it was still a process, and that was, I have to tell everyone, we all have been somewhere and have to get to where we need to be, and it's a process. So forgive yourself and allow yourself to go through it.
Well, I
would tell people the same thing. I mean, you as well. I mean, you've touched thousands of lives and made a difference in so many people's lives. It's extremely rewarding. But had we not followed those premonitions or promptings to pursue that, we never would have experienced this incredible amount of love and compassion that we have for people. And that's what I've always told people that I've talked with or counseled with in the past was, find your journey. Whatever it is, find your cause. Find something you're passionate about. Find something that will make a difference in others' lives and go for it. Yeah. And it's amazing what kind of windows and doors open up. It's remarkable.
Definitely. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, are you open to that?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
How do they find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, just my name, Susie Augenstein. And then if people connect on there, I'll even connect them to the Let's Love Better page after they friend me on there. I don't mind at all. I'm at a point in my life now that I try to stay really open to whoever reaches out to me, meeting people for lunch, things like that. It's just really joyful for me I like connecting with people no matter what. I've always been that way.
Oh, it's in her wheelhouse.
But
for sure.
But yeah, I'm always happy to have a phone call, meet for lunch, things like that. And truly, even if it's, right now some people are saying, well, I don't need that. But like I said, they might in a week. And I have connections to so many people that they don't have to feel alone, Yeah. Even if it's a 10-minute conversations with me, I can hook them up with so many people that will just help them in their journey.
Saying that's a gift.
It is a gift.
It really is.
Absolutely.
When you have that somebody in your life that you say, hey, I need this. Oh, I got a guy. You know what I mean? I know. It's a gift. And so, you know what? Thank you for being you. And
welcome.
And it's actually part of what drew me to her, right? Because I knew, but by nature, I'm introverted. Uh-huh. I know she's very extroverted. But
it works out.
It works out. And it's like I knew that right off the bat in 8th grade, bringing the whole thing full circle, right? It's like, there you go.
She couldn't help but fall in love in the 8th grade in choir class. I mean, that's a done deal.
Had to be. It was meant to be.
Thank you, John.
Well, thanks for coming out. I really do appreciate it. And if you're listening to this podcast or watching it and you are in a spot where you're having some thoughts that are scaring you and you don't know where to turn, call the Lifeline. Call 1-800-273-8255. They are there 365 days a year, 24/7, and they know how to help you. So you know what? If you don't have that person you can turn to that you don't feel comfortable with, reach out to the Lifeline. The world would not be better without you in it, and that goes for every one of you. So I appreciate you guys coming back for another week and listening to the subjects that we talk about, and whatever it is that brought you here, I'm grateful for it. Again, I want to give a shout out to GTM Builders. If you're thinking about building a home, check them out, gtmbuilders.com. And tonight's episode was brought to you by A. Warner Homes Real Estate. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, reach out to them at 801-867-5078. I always get pressure and then I forget numbers. I don't even know my number. No, but if you have any questions or comments for the podcast, you want to reach out to us, call us at 435-277-0235. And let us know what you'd like to hear on the podcast. Let us know if you've got somebody that you think would be great to be interviewed. And if you want to check us out online at Life's Worth Living Foundation. And thanks again for being here for another week, and we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.